Today I'm going to show you guys how I gave this cardigan a second chance at life. It was old and ugly, and honestly I was just going to throw it away. I don't think anyone at Goodwill would have even bought it. As you can see, the sleeves are really short, so I will make them longer, but I'm going to start by using these clippy things because I kept poking myself with pins all day. And I'm just going to mark how tight I want the sleeve, keeping in mind I do need 2 seam allowances. And I'm also going to mark where I want to crop it. So I started off by cropping it, and I will use this fabric later. It was a little hard to cut, so I had to put some elbow grease into it. And by the way, this is a rib knit material. And by the way, I am taking like pretty much the whole thing apart, so if you are making this with just material and not an upcycle, this video should help you as well. But I start by detaching the sleeves, and the seams here on this top were like really thick, and I didn't think they would go through my machine really, so I cut those out. And here I'm just taking in those sleeves. So once I take it in, I'm just going to open it up and cut it in half. I highly suggest always labeling your front and your back of the sleeve. I always put a little F for the front. But these sleeves, the front and the back were pretty similar, but if you're working with one that's different, you might want to label it. But here I'm just doing the same thing that I did to the one sleeve to the other. To make the sleeves longer, I wanted to have like a cute little bell sleeve cuff thing, so I used the excess fabric and I just made a little shape, and I lined it up with like the end of the sleeve so I knew how wide to make it. So here I'm just cutting it out, and then I'm going to fold it in half and make sure it's nice and even, and then I'm going to cut another one out for the other sleeve. So if you don't have an item to upcycle and you're just making this out of fabric, just get a long sleeve shirt that fits you well, trace the front, flip it over, and then trace the back of the sleeve. And you can feel through the top where the seams are. So for these little things where the lace goes through, I like to cut them 3/4 of an inch wide, but I am using a serger, so it's going to trim off some. So if you're not using a serger, then I suggest making it just like a half an inch wide. So I just cut a couple strips for those. So now I'm just going to deconstruct the rest of it, and I'm just cutting like the side seam and the shoulder seam to separate the front and the back. I'm just using this pattern that I have for reference, but pretty much I'm going to take in the side like at an angle so that it fits tighter, and trim the front part of it. You can also use like another shirt that you have as reference, or I do have the medium size version of this pattern in one of my other videos, so I'll put that in the description. So you just pretty much need this general shape. You can always cut in the front a little bit later when you try it on. And as you can see, I'm lining up that sleeve where the armhole is. That way I can make sure that when I line up the sleeve to the armhole later, it'll fit. Here I just flipped over the piece I just cut out, and I'm cutting out the other side. Here I'm just cutting out 2 back pieces, so again I'm taking in that side at an angle a little bit so it fits more snug. So lining up that back sleeve with the armhole to make sure that it fits later. So once I have one piece, I'm just gonna flip it over and cut out the same piece for the other side. So you should have 2 back pieces, the sleeve pieces, 2 front pieces, the bottom of the sleeves, and the little strap pieces. Now it's time to start pinning and sewing, so I'm just gonna pin together the sleeve pieces. And just a reminder, I want the same on the outside, so instead of pinning right sides together like you usually would, you're gonna pin wrong sides together. So the part that's gonna be the inside of the sleeve, you're like pinning that together because we want the seam on the outside. And I'm also going to pin the back pieces together. So I'm going to sew the sleeves together, the straps, the bottom of the sleeves, and the back pieces together. So if you're using a sewing machine, you can use a hem stitch and put it on the lowest width, or you can use a zigzag stitch and put it on a low width, but the zigzag stitch will probably make it like a lettuce hem, like really wavy. I do prefer to sew this on a serger with a narrow width. And always make sure that you test out the stitch on a piece of scrap first, especially with the serger, because those tensions can be really tricky to get sometimes. As you can see, mine was messing up, and so I had to play around with this tension here. Once I got it down, I just started sewing those straps, the strips that I cut out for the straps, along each side. And I kind of trim it while I'm cutting it, so it ends up being like about a half an inch wide. I wanted the ends of the sleeves to kind of be like a lettuce hem and wavy. So here, when I sew the fabric, I'm pulling it and stretching it. And when I do that, it's making the fabric wavy when it comes out. Next, I'm going to sew the part, like the inside part of the two front pieces and then the top of the back piece. And I'm also going to pin together the bottom of the sleeve with the sleeve and sew that together as well. Here's what I have sewn so far. So next I'm going to put the sleeves together and finish those off and sew the front and the back pieces together. For the front and the back pieces, I'm just pinning the sides together, and again we want the outside seams to show, so I'm pinning the wrong sides together. And then I'm also going to pin the top shoulder part, making sure it lines up. For the sleeves, I'm just gonna pin the two sides together to close it. Here's me just finishing up those parts that I just pinned together. And once we attach the front and the back, we're just gonna sew that bottom of the bodice piece. And as you can see here, while I'm sewing it, it does get pretty wavy. For knit fabrics, it stretches a lot horizontally, so that's why when you stretch horizontally on the lines, it gets pretty wavy, but when you sew vertically, the seam tends to be pretty straight. So when I try it on, I saw that it overlaps. We don't want it to overlap because, you know, we want to show off a little, and I like to show off my tattoo, so I'm going to trim the front pieces a little bit. So we're almost there. So for the sleeves, if you want the seam to show on the outside, you're going to pin the wrong sides together and sew on the outside, but it's kind of hard for me to do that on a serger. Like, I'll probably end up cutting the fabric, so I'm just going to just attach them the regular way with the seam on the inside and use my sewing machine for this with the hem stitch. When you pin sleeves, you always want to start with the seam, so I start pinning both the seams and then I just go around this circle. And yes, so now I'm just gonna sew those sleeves on, and again I'm using a hem stitch just on my regular sewing machine. And you want to make sure that throughout the whole project your sewing machine or your serger is going through both layers of fabric, so you don't end up with any holes. So the last part is just the lace up part, so I'm cutting out 2-inch strips, and I sew 6 onto each side, so I need a total of 12. So I'm just going to take a pin and mark where I want to sew on the little strap pieces. I usually start with the top and the bottom, and then I evenly disperse the rest of them. I usually make them about 2 inches apart. And once it looks good, I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side, just match up the sides and put the pins there as well. So if you're doing this on a serger, you can just fold the little strap things in half, place it where the needle is, and you're going to place it on the right side of the fabric, and then when it sews, it's just going to trim off that excess. If you're sewing this on a sewing machine, you're just going to use a straight stitch and sew those on and then trim off the thread and the excess after. And now we just lace that bad boy up. I used plastic cording that I got from Michaels, and I just burn the ends a tiny bit so they don't fray. And here's the before and after, but honestly that picture on the right doesn't do it justice because it looks so cute on. Like, I love this top and it was literally so comfy. I almost fell asleep in it, and I wore it while I did this voiceover. I think the only thing I would have did different is add maybe 2 lines in the front, which honestly I meant to do and I just forgot. But if you like this video and you want more tutorials, please like and subscribe, and you know, all that good stuff. You can also comment any questions or tutorials you'd like to see me make down below. You can follow my IG to see my work, and I also always take custom orders through my DMs and thanks for watching.